Today is our very first tutorial day. I don't know what that was. I am dressed in my flannel because we're going to make this demon blade from Supernatural or Ruby's blade. Doesn't matter what you call it, still the same thing. So this is the one that I created. I created it for my husband for MegaCon this past couple weeks ago for his Dean cosplay. We did have a few hiccups with it, so during this tutorial you will see what we did. And then at the very end, I'm going to give you some do's and some don'ts and a few little tidbits of information. Hopefully you guys won't have as much trouble as we did, and your blade will come out even more awesome than ours. Alright, for this project, you're going to need a piece of foam about the size of a piece of paper, but 1/4 of an inch thick. Show you the thickness. You're also going to need some paintbrushes, some paint in silver, brown, and black, Mod Podge, an X-Acto knife, some clay, and if you're feeling a little squirrely, you can get some sculpting tools as well. Okay, so to start, we are measuring out the length of the blade and the handle. We found some measurements online, which I will try to find and put in the comments for you, so that way you can have the same measurements we did. Also, I want to note, at this point, I realized that this was going to be a really long project. My husband's a super perfectionist. Okay, so at this point, we realized we had a very different view as to how we were going to do the blade, and kind of put us at a standstill as we discussed it. So just make sure that you have a plan when you go into this, you know what you're doing. Right now we're trying to figure out the distance between each curve, because like I said, my husband's a super perfectionist, so he wanted to make sure each curve was perfectly spaced, and it just became a nightmare. Okay, so another little note, make sure you have plenty of reference photos. That's what we keep looking at every once in a while. I personally would have printed out a photo of the blade or of the knife so I could have it as a template to cut out instead of hand drawing everything. Alright, so my husband's perfectionist side gave out and he let me draw the blade and then picked on what I drew. So again, guys, reference photos. So much easier than trying to freehand it. Especially if you are a perfectionist or you're working with perfectionists. Because as you can tell, I get really frustrated with him. Okay, so we finally got the shape of the blade the way we wanted it. And so now we are cutting out our template to place against the foam. Okay, so I grabbed a piece of tape just to hold down the template to the foam so the template wouldn't shift while I was cutting. And once I got that tape down, then I took the X-Acto knife and carefully started cutting around the edges of the template. Also, you get to see where I made a big boo-boo, so we forgot to create the little nub at the end of the blade to insert into the hilt. Okay, so to make the hilt, we just stood the blade up on the foam and measured around it and created just a small rectangle. Once we cut that out, then we created a small slice within the hilt to fit the handle. Don't fit it to the blade, fit it to the handle, unless you have that little nub. If you do create that little nub that we forgot, you want that little nub to be the same size as the handle. Once you have your 3 pieces cut, you want to get your clay out. I actually had a lot of fun molding the clay over the different pieces. Okay, so he is covering the blade completely with clay while I do the handle part. When you are covering the handle, remember to leave a little bit of a space, enough to get the foam into your hilt. A few little trick with clay. In order to get it smooth, you can add pieces and chunks to it. Just take your finger and just kind of slightly rub it across the clay and it will smooth out. He then took the sculpting tools for the clay and started cutting out little grooves and little notches to texturize the clay to look more like wood. Once you're done sculpting your handle, you can set that aside. I recommend kind of trying to make sure it's sitting upright. That way any of your little texturized grooves or anything like that don't flatten out as it dries. Okay, so we unfortunately had to scrap the clay due to cracking. So I grabbed some 400 grit sandpaper and I used it on the base of the blade, and that's the etchings that were carved into it. Just used it to lightly sand some of the little grains that were on the handle. Again, do this very lightly because you will remove the clay. And make sure that the clay has had enough time to sit. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the actual blade. As you can see, it's very blocky, so I tried to do this to kind of round the edges to make it a little more knife-like and not such a cube. This part can be kind of tedious and a little annoying, so just stick with it. I ended up taking an X-Acto knife to the ends because when I was rubbing it a little too hard with the sandpaper, it started to kind of rip a little bit and fray, I guess is the best word for it. But I just took a little X-Acto knife and kind of just nicked at the pieces a little bit and they came off and it was perfectly fine. For this next part, I didn't have a printer, so I just took a piece of paper and blew up an image on my computer of the inscription and took a marker and lightly traced out the inscription. I then cut out the little paper and I'm taking my X-Acto knife and just making small little dots along the lines. Once you're done with all your little dots, remove the piece of paper and use those as guidelines to carve out very, very carefully all of the inscription. Remember, you can use your piece of paper to help you remember where each line goes. I did make a couple small mistakes because I wasn't looking at my paper, but it's there to help you guys. Use it. Once you're done, you're just going to flip it over and do the other side. So this is the demon blade with all the etchings already done. And this is my favorite part, guys. Painting. Yes, I love to paint. This is like one of my favorite things to do. It's very soothing. So I'm super lazy. I didn't get anything to pour the paint into. I just opened it up and stuck my brush in and just started to paint. This is super easy part because it's just plain silver. So just paint the entire side silver. Once you are done with that, you can set it aside, let it dry. And I actually forgot to round off the edges of the hilt. So I did have to pick up my 400 grit sandpaper to round off the edges of the hilt before painting it. But once you do that, you can again grab the silver paint and paint one side. Okay, so the handle of the blade is super easy. All I did was, again, super lazy, guys, just stuck my paintbrush into the brown and painted one side. And remember when painting that you don't want to paint the bottom of the handle because that part is white. So I went and ended up doing a second coat on that first side because I wanted it to be more silver. Okay, and now pick up the handle and do the handle as well. I'm gonna get the other side. And don't worry if your lines aren't super even at the bottom of the handle. If you've looked at any of the pictures for Ruby's blade or the demon blade. It's not very even at the bottom. Okay, so while that's drying, I decided to mix up some more paint. I just grabbed a piece of paper that was next to me. It's the same paper I used to create the inscriptions, and grabbed the black paint and the brown and created a mix to make a darker brown. I did make a little mistake here, as I always forget that this black is very pigmented, so it ends up turning colors almost a grayish instead of a darker version of them. So I ended up having to use more brown than I anticipated, so I ended up having a lot of excess. So hopefully you won't make that same mistake. Now for this part, I took a fine liner paintbrush to paint in all the little grooves that we created during the sculpting process. Okay, so while that is drying, I pick up the blade again, and I took the black this time, and a very fine liner paintbrush, and very carefully went through all the little edges. I actually used the inscription to kind of give me a little more clue as to where I was going, because it was a little hard to see after I had painted it all silver. Once you're done with the one side, again, you want to set it aside, let it dry, and then go on to the other. Okay, so don't con crunch, guys. This is the morning of the con. We are about to leave, actually. And I really quickly had to glue this all together and hoped that it stayed. We started with the hilt, hot glue that to your handle. And then you are going to hot glue the blade to the part of the handle that is sticking out. I hot glued all around it, and I was very thankful that it stayed, but I was also very lucky that it stayed. So moral of the story, guys, don't con crunch. Please don't do it. Don't be like me. I'm sure you'll do it. Everybody does. All right, so here's some afterthoughts. We had a few issues, as you could see, making the blade. One issue was my husband wanted to make the whole thing out of clay, and that didn't work out so well. Ended up cracking on the blade right as he was finishing up the inscription on the demon blade. So we had to actually scrap that whole thing, and I just had to paint the foam and etch the inscription on there. If I were to do it again, and somebody wanted to do the full thing in clay, I would get a thinner foam for the blade part, and then wrap that so that the clay is thicker so it won't crack so easily, if that's something that you're looking to do. I think that the clay would give it more of a rounded look instead of so boxy. So I'm going to try that next time I create this blade. The other thought that I had was I did mess up, as I said, I messed up a little bit. I forgot to cut that little nub at the end of the blade so it would stick in. I didn't have any issues with it though. A little bit of hot glue and it was secure all day. He never had a problem with it. We were also thinking maybe of taking some pins to stick them into the thicker foam and stick them into the blade to help keep it more secure, and then hot glue that as well. That was another idea that we had. Our final thing. As you know, as most people know, clay is very fragile. I forgot to put Mod Podge on the edge of my blade. So, someone accidentally, getting all excited because they saw the demon blade in my husband's back pocket, went to point it out and accidentally touched it, and it came falling out of his pocket and it cracked. So I have to redo this whole blade, which kind of stinks. He was very apologetic. He was really, really sorry. He didn't mean to do it. There's no beef with this person. We have no idea. I have actually no idea who it was. But yeah, very sad, very upset about it. It was a lot of work, guys. I was up till about 3 a.m. finishing this up because I had pin curls in my hair and all sorts of other things going on for my Snow White of that day. So next time, definitely want to remember to seal it. I think the main reason I didn't seal it was I wanted to redo the painting I did on here. I didn't get the details I wanted to on the blade, and so I didn't seal it, and I honestly didn't think we would have an issue. But yeah, so that happened. So I have to redo the blade, or at least try and fix that. I'm going to see if I can fix that part first. If not, then I'm going to have to unfortunately scrap it. And I'll probably just use this for maybe photo shoot or something like that where I'm covering the handle. But yes, so that is our Demon Blade tutorial. I hope you all liked it, and I hope you guys have fun building your own, and I hope you learned something from my tutorial. Until next time, love you all. And if you want to continue getting tutorials, tips, and tricks from a newbie cosplayer, just hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you get the notifications that I have new videos. Also, if you like this video, like the tutorial, or you just like my face, hit the like button. Have a great day. Mwah.